The phone rang at 5:30 p.m. on June 22, 1983, and Emanuela Orlandi's sister picked up expecting the usual update. Instead, what she heard would become the last words anyone in the family would ever hear from the 15-year-old. Emanuela's voice was excited, almost breathless in the sweltering Roman heat. A man had approached her after her flute lesson, she explained, offering her a job selling Avon cosmetics. She'd be home soon. The line went dead. By 9:30 that night, when Emanuela still hadn't walked through the door of their Vatican City apartment, her parents began to worry. By midnight, they knew something was terribly wrong. The girl who lived behind the fortified walls of the world's most powerful religious institution, who had spent her entire childhood playing freely in the Vatican gardens, believing she was in the safest place on earth, had vanished into thin air. 42 years later, the Vatican has finally admitted what Emanuela's family has suspected all along. They've been hiding the truth the entire time. But before we dive into today's story, if you enjoy unsolved mysteries involving powerful institutions, dark conspiracies, and decades of cover-ups, then you're in the right place, because that's exactly what we cover here. And I upload new stories 3 to 4 times every week. So if that interests you, please gently tap the like button and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. All right, let's get into today's story, which takes place in Vatican City and Rome, Italy, beginning in June 1983. Emanuela Orlandi wasn't just any teenager living in Rome. She was a Vatican citizen, which is an extremely rare distinction shared by fewer than 1,000 people on the planet at any given time. Her father, Ercole Orlandi, worked as a clerk in the Prefecture of the Pontifical household, essentially a mid-level employee of the Pope himself. This position came with an extraordinary perk that most families could never imagine. The Orlandi family lived inside an apartment within the actual boundaries of Vatican City, behind walls that had stood for centuries. Emanuela and her siblings, including her older brother Pietro and 3 sisters, had what Pietro later described as the run of the Vatican gardens, treating the historic grounds like their own private backyard. For a child growing up in the early 1980s, this was like living in a fortress where nothing bad could ever touch you. The family attended Mass at Sant'Anna dei Palafrenieri, the parish church inside the Vatican walls. Emanuela sang in the choir there, her voice echoing through centuries-old halls where popes had walked. She was in her 2nd year of high school, and even though regular classes had ended for the summer, she continued taking flute lessons 3 times a week at the Tommaso Ludovico da Vittoria School of Music, connected to the Pontifical Institute of Sacred Music. The school was located in Piazza di Sant'Apollinare, right next to the famous Piazza Navona in central Rome. To get there, Emanuela would take a bus for a few stops, then walk the last several hundred meters through the narrow Roman streets. She was a responsible, ambitious girl who loved music and dreamed of a normal teenage life despite growing up in one of the most unusual places on Earth. June 22, 1983, started like any other summer day in Rome, except the heat was absolutely brutal. The temperature climbed into the 90s, and the humidity made the air feel thick enough to cut with a knife. Emanuela left home around 4 o'clock that afternoon, already running late for her lesson. She'd asked her brother Pietro for a ride into town, but he refused, probably not thinking much of it at the time. Emanuela cursed at him and slammed the door on her way out. Pietro would replay that moment in his mind for the rest of his life, wishing he'd said yes, wishing he'd driven her, wishing he could take back that one small decision that seemed so insignificant in the moment. Emanuela made it to her flute lesson, We know this because other students saw her there. She left the music school sometime after 5 o'clock, walking out into the oppressive heat of the late afternoon. At some point after leaving, she found a payphone and called home. That's when she told her sister about the man who'd approached her. He claimed to represent Avon Cosmetics and said he was impressed with her appearance and poise. He offered her work distributing promotional flyers, maybe even modeling at a fashion show. For a 15-year-old girl, this must have felt like an incredible opportunity, the kind of thing that could change everything. Her sister told her to come straight home so they could discuss it with their parents. Emanuela agreed and hung up. She never made it home. Somewhere in the few blocks between that phone call and the Vatican walls, Emanuela Orlandi disappeared. When Emanuela didn't show up for the evening plans with her sisters and friends, the family started making calls. When she wasn't at any of her usual spots, they began walking the route she would have taken. By the time night fell and she still hadn't appeared, Ercole Orlandi contacted the Vatican and Italian authorities. Keep that detail in mind because it becomes important later. Within days, over 3,000 flyers bearing Emanuela's photograph were plastered across Rome. The case immediately became a media sensation, partly because of where she lived, but also because of what happened next. 3 days after she vanished, the Orlandi family began receiving phone calls. 2 men, identifying themselves as Pierluigi and Mario, claimed they'd seen a girl matching Emanuela's description after she went missing. Both men knew details about Emanuela that only her family should have known, details that had never been made public. Then came a call from someone who would only identify himself as the American because of his accent. This caller played a recording of what sounded like Emanuela's voice and made a shocking demand. He claimed a group had kidnapped Emanuela to force Italian authorities to release Mehmet Ali Agca, the Turkish terrorist who had shot and nearly killed Pope John Paul II in St. Peter's Square, just 2 years earlier in 1981. The caller gave the Vatican until June 30th to arrange the exchange or Emanuela would be killed. But here's where it gets stranger. The date came and went with no resolution, yet no body appeared. The calls continued sporadically for years, each one offering different versions of what had happened, each one pulling investigators in new directions. By 1984, Pope John Paul II himself visited the Orlandi family at their Vatican apartment. He told them directly that Emanuela's case was a case of international terrorism, and assured them the Holy See was doing everything humanly possible to bring her home safely. But after that visit, according to Pietro Orlandi, the Pope allowed a wall of silence to descend around his sister's disappearance. The Vatican stopped cooperating with Italian investigators. Documents went missing. Witnesses became unavailable. In 1997, after 14 years of investigation, Italian prosecutors officially closed the case, stating in their final report that the theory of international terrorism was likely a misdirection, a false trail meant to throw everyone off the real motive. But if it wasn't terrorism, then what was it? Over the next 4 decades, theories multiplied like shadows. Some investigators believed the Banda della Magliana, Rome's notorious organized crime syndicate, had kidnapped Emanuela to pressure the Vatican into repaying massive debts the mafia had funneled through the Vatican Bank. In 2012, Italian magistrates opened the tomb of Enrico De Pettis, a mafia boss who died in 1990, based on claims from his ex-girlfriend that he'd confessed to being involved in Emanuela's disappearance. They found nothing conclusive. Other theories were even darker. In 2012, Father Gabriele Amorth, The Vatican's chief exorcist, who claimed to have performed tens of thousands of exorcisms, publicly stated that Emanuela had been the victim of a pedophile ring operating within the Vatican itself. Then, in 2017, an Italian journalist published leaked documents that appeared to show the Vatican had spent nearly 500 million lire, equivalent to about 250,000 euros, to keep someone hidden in London between 1983 and 1997. The documents detailed rent payments for a building on Chapman Road in London, medical expenses, and transfers, with the final entry in 1997 noting a transfer to the Vatican and completion of final procedures. The Vatican immediately denounced the documents as false and ridiculous, but they refused to explain how such detailed forgeries could have been created or who might have produced them. When Pope Francis was elected in 2013, the Orlandi family thought they might finally get answers. Instead, when Pietro approached the new pope, Francis told him cryptically that Emanuela is in heaven. The family interpreted this as proof that the Vatican knew she was dead, that they'd known for years, and that they were never going to reveal how or why. The case exploded back into global consciousness in October 2022 when Netflix released a 4-part documentary called Vatican Girl: The Disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi. The series featured new testimony from a childhood friend who claimed Emanuela had confided just 1 week before her disappearance that someone close to the Pope had sexually assaulted her in the Vatican gardens. The documentary sparked such intense public pressure that in January 2023, the Vatican announced they were reopening their investigation. In June 2023, exactly 40 years after Emanuela vanished, the Vatican handed over evidence to Rome prosecutors. In November 2023, the Italian Parliament voted nearly unanimously to establish a bicameral commission with full investigative powers and a 4-year mandate to uncover the truth. And then, in May 2025, came the bombshell that confirmed what the Orlandi family had insisted on for 4 decades. Alessandro Ditti, the Vatican's chief prosecutor, publicly admitted at a book presentation in Rome that despite years of denials, the Vatican does possess a confidential file on Emanuela Orlandi's disappearance. The file exists. They found it. They've had it all along. The Vatican claimed they would continue cooperating with Italian authorities while keeping the dossier's contents classified, but the admission alone was seismic. For 42 years, the world's most powerful religious institution had looked the Orlandi family in the eye and claimed they had no special knowledge of what happened to their daughter. Now everyone knows that was a lie. Emanuela Orlandi's case remains one of the most thoroughly documented unsolved mysteries in modern European history. Whether you believe the Vatican covered up a sex scandal, that the mafia used her as a bargaining chip, or that something even darker occurred on that sweltering June evening in 1983, one thing is absolutely certain. The Vatican knows more than they're saying. They always have. And they're still fighting to keep their secrets buried. If you found this story as disturbing as I did, I've got another Vatican mystery you need to see. Click the video on your screen right now about the darkest secrets hidden in the Vatican archives. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories like this. Thanks for watching. Until next time, see ya.